So hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in to check out this track breakdown. We just released Closer featuring Sanchal Malhar a few days ago, and I thought this would be a good time to open up the session for you guys and let you take a look at some of the production and mixing decisions that were made. Let's jump right into it. So as you can see, this track was produced in Ableton. At the stage where I was finished with production, I actually took over the mixing process into Logic, into a completely new session. And the reason for that is that it's really helpful to export all your tracks once you're done producing and start your mixing session with a clean slate. So you have all of the bandwidth and the DSP that you require to just really go nuts with it. I find that if you try to finish the mix on a session where you've already produced the track, that you don't have that much headroom to put another round of plugins and processing onto everything. So it can start to feel a bit heavy and crowded, and your computer has a much higher chance of freaking out. So let's have a listen to the song and see how it's sounding.
Before I taste your sweetness, you make me cry like orange wine. Before we ever met, I never thought this could be real.
Okay, so first things first, right off the bat, you're going to notice that this doesn't really sound anything like the finished version, but that was kind of the point. That's the point of the mixing process. This was just production for me, and the vocals are dry, and I had some placeholder reverbs and delays in here, but I actually muted them before I went into the mix because I just wanted all my stems to be really clean and dry. First up here we have the drums. And the drums consist of their electronic samples. There's like an acoustic kit from the Native Instruments, Abbey Road drummer. There's some impacts and sound effects over here. In the blue over here, you have the vocals. Of course, then you have the bass line, which came from Omnisphere. The synths are all over here, and there are a lot of frozen tracks over here in Ableton. And that's just because I wanted to lock in whatever I'd already produced. But also, yeah, a couple of unfrozen tracks. So yeah, it's not perfect, but that's just how it happened. Anyway, let's start from the top. The most basic layer is obviously the kick. Very simple, quite an unassuming kick, still needs a lot of cleaning up, which happens in the next mix stage. So here I have this kick that's like a filtered off kick, which is sort of like acting as like a counter rhythm to the main kick. And yeah, I use Neutron 3 Elements or Neutron the full version if you have it all the time. I think it's one of the best subtractive EQs. So for cutting, it's it's very precise and it's very present. Like in the sense you can really hear a cut happening. So a little bit goes a long way with this plugin. So use it carefully, but also it's really useful. You'll see it on most of my tracks. So on the snare, there's an initial Pro Cue just to kind of remove some of the high end and the low end. And then I've got a UAD Pultec equalizer over here. And in that EQ, we just kind of added a little bit at about 300 in the mid-range, scooped out some 3K and added some high-end back. So essentially we're taking out some of the original high-end and then putting some of it back in using the UAD Pultec. I really like this kilohertz transient shaper. Just like the tiniest little bit of attack and a little bit of reduction in the sustain. Followed by some saturation. This is a free plugin at the moment, Softtube Saturation Knob. It's really good. It's one of my favorite plugins out there for saturation. So if you haven't already got it, make sure you go get it. And this is what Neutron Elements on this track looks like. I've got something going on the EQ for the snare, with and without it. It's subtle, but to be honest, the whole process of mixing is just about doing a lot of subtle things that end up sounding like a big change. I've generally found that in most circumstances, you don't really need to go massively cutting or increasing the EQ of your tracks, because if you find yourself having to do that, it's important to consider whether you're working with the wrong layer. So just keep that in mind, is that some sounds should be worked on and can be fixed, and there are other sounds that are just really, really far away from what you're actually looking for. So maybe it's a better idea to just look for a different sample so you don't have to process it quite so much. So over here we have hi-hats that have come from a Tanzbar drum machine pack that I have. So this noise hat is from Omnisphere again. The reason why I don't have it in this session is that at some point I actually froze it and exported it into a new track because it was getting a little bit heavy on DSP, having like 40 instances of Omnisphere running. So I started doing the bouncing and committing to things somewhere like while I was actually producing the song. And it's good to commit to things. It's good to just be like, okay, this is what my hi-hat's going to sound like. And of course you can go back to change it if you really need to, but generally I find that this sort of workflow works well for me. This hi-hat has like a slight envelope in the decay that just kind of opens up and down. And a little bit of movement really goes a long way. It's really helpful to choose one parameter in your drum synths and in your melodic synths to just give your layers a bit of movement. Then we have a tambourine, and there's a high tom over here. And then over here we have this thing called AC kit, acoustic kit. I use Native Instruments Abbey Road drums a lot. I'm pretty sure this was Abbey Road Modern Drummer. And this was an acoustic kit that I again filtered out and used it as a counter rhythm to the main beat. Sounds a bit sort of gated, but that is because I actually did gate the signal. I just wanted that nice reverb of the room sound from the kick to come through. That really sort of helps the main kick to really sort of open up and be heard. Let's have a listen to the whole beat again. So yeah, that's how the beat basically came together. I thought that this acoustic kit subgroup was really important to getting the sound to fall in place. Like I said, I love that room reverb that comes out of the kick. Really worked well for me. Moving on from the kick, from the drum kit, sorry, there's SFX. Nothing too crazy going on, honestly, just a bit of... That's a little reverb bounce that I took. I put the vocals through a reverb plugin, really high tail, bounced the wet signal, and then reversed it before the vocals actually kick in. So the vocals were actually one of the most time-consuming parts of all of this because Sanchal left me with a lot of really good takes, and I basically sat and listened through all of them and combined them all, and wanted to figure out how to treat his voice to make it sound like it's in front of you, but also to make it really fit within all the other elements of the song. So, of course, we have some melodyne, just a bit of tuning up, a little bit of timing correction, just like stuff that, if there was a take where we were a little bit off in pitch, but I really like the feeling or emotion of that, I would always rather go for a take with better emotion and slightly weaker pitch, because even if the pitch is perfect in a take where the emotion isn't right, you can't put the emotion back into the take, but you can fix up the pitch a little bit if necessary. It wasn't really all that important in this session because Sanchal is a highly seasoned veteran who really knows how to hit his notes. But of course, like in general, it's always a good idea to give your vocals a little bit of nudging here or there just to kind of polish them up a little bit. So the vocal chain was essentially started off with Melodyne. We have a major Pro Q, like a high and low cut filter going on over here. I'm using the FabFilter Pro DS, Ableton Glue Compressor, and again, Neutron 3 elements. And that's on the track. Over here on the vocal bus, I have a bunch more processing. So there's the Slate virtual tape machines. I thought that this sort of added a really nice little touch to it. Let's have a little before and after.
I never thought this could be real. I never thought this could be real.
So it just compresses it a bit. It just sort of takes out some of that slightly digital high end and replaces it with a nice tape saturation. I'm also using the 1176 LN limiter from Universal Audio. I've got this BX Opto plugin. It's actually almost supposed to be a pedal, but I really like how fast and responsive this plugin is. And I like using it on vocals or on certain melody layers where you need like a fast compressor to just even out the overall balance. This is an Rc24 Reverb plugin from Softube that I was using for a while, but as you can see, I turned that off. I also turned off UAD Reverb because I was using these as reference reverbs while I was producing the song.
Can't believe my luck when our eyes meet.
So you can see it sounds a lot better with it, and I had it on while I was writing the song, but I bypassed the plugin before I actually exported the stems to be mixed in Logic, which we will get into that right as soon as I take you through all the rest of the session. Sanchal recorded like a double take, like a double tracked comp. So I chose some words where I wanted it to come in and sort of be a little bit of a backing vocal. So
I'm losing myself in you now. Who is who I can?
So as you can hear, that layer is really like very heavily affected.
I'm losing myself in you now.
So this was a highly affected chorus layer.
I'm losing myself in you now.
And those little backing layers that come in just add a lot of they just add force to what he's singing. So yeah, choose your occasions well. The places where you want those double track vocals to come in, choose those occasions in a way that it actually benefits the song overall. And moving on from the vocals, what we have here is Omnisphere. That got me my bass line. So, I mean, I can hear this so clearly on my headphones. I don't know if you can, but this bass is like, it's amazing, but it's also really out of control. And so that also is something that got taken care of in the mix stage. Over here on the bass line, I've got a compressor just to level things out. On Neutron over here, you can see I actually have to tame a lot of these low-end frequencies because it's just so strong, it's really intense. And I also pulled out about 1K because I wanted that little honk to come through. Again, this UAD Pultec equalizer, really good, really high quality. Just using it for a little bit of a dip, it's not really doing anything else. This is a really useful plugin called BX Control from Brainworks. I've just got the bass being made mono until about 115 and keeping the stereo width where it is. This is Shaperbox. This is what I use for sidechaining. Really useful plugin. It just sort of does a very audible version of the sidechain. And you can really control the curve exactly how you want your sidechain to look and sound. So it just gives you a lot more control, in my opinion. This over here, Track Spacer, is a really interesting plugin. It's also kind of like a sidechain plugin. So what I have is I've got a sidechain coming into Track Spacer from. So I've got 3 track spacers: one for the kick, one for the strings, one for the vocals on the bass line. Because all 3 of those instruments are in different areas, and the bass line was fighting with everything. It was like ready to rumble with every single layer in the track, and I just came up with the solution to help it all fit in better. So let's have a look at how this is interacting.
I really wanna be close to you. I wanna be on your mind.
That's for the kick, and this is for the vocals.
I really wanna be close to you. I wanna be on your mind. So close to you. With you all day and all night.
Yeah, so what is happening is it's just a more focused kind of sidechain. If you have layers fighting with each other, check out this plugin Track Spacer, really good. So then we have the synth section. Let's have a look, listen to what that sounds like. So I really love Pigments, such a good synth. So as you can see over here, I really like how I can control. I really like how in Pigments you can control the LFOs so carefully and in such a fine way that I was able to basically get the sound that I was looking for. Yep, that's the synth layer, and then finally, of course, there's guitar. On the guitar track, I've got another track spacer filtering out the vocals basically. Sorry, not filtering out, but sidechaining based on the vocals. So
my muse position and let me sing as I watch you smile.
So again, the vocal needs to be out in front. So anything that's fighting with the vocals in the mid-range needs to be addressed, and this is how I did that. Some pretty wild EQing out here to get this guitar to sound right. I've got a filter that goes up and down, but after I filtered it, I put this amp sim on it, and a second amp sim, and then I put Shaperbox to kind of... This is really useful not just for sidechaining, but for doing anything like this. I wanted to clear some space towards the end of each count, and that was useful. Got another EQ, just because it became a bit mid-range heavy after these two amps. Then I've got neutron elements, more wild EQing, then I've got a compressor, the BX Opto, and finally another track spacer. So yeah, that's a overall look at the production session, and now let's jump into the mix. Well, so we're here in the Logic session where I did the mixing of the track. As you can see, there are far fewer layers over here than there were in the other session, and that's intentional. I combined like the whole acoustic kit into one track over here. Both the hi-hat tracks became one track. There was one new thing that happened over here. I actually added some new strings in this session. Once I brought the old strings into this session, I kind of felt that they were a bit lifeless, and I also happened to pick up the Native Instruments Complete 13 Ultimate Collectors Edition, gorgeous strings, like the string ensemble and the Amati Viola, the Stradivarius, the Cremona Quartet series. So I was quite excited to try those out, and I think that they definitely were highly worth it. So that's what we have over here, and these are the sends that were bounced individually, so that I can then control the stereo imaging and the volume and everything, and the EQ of the reverb stems. So let's have a listen to how this is sounding over here. So yeah, this session was all about cleaning things up, resolving any conflicts in the frequencies, and just kind of gently putting things where they belong. So let's have a look at the drums. How did we get the session from sounding kind of rough and unfinished in the previous version to this? Let's have a look. So the kick, I'm gonna just bypass everything that's on the main kick layer. So the first thing that I did is put a neutron on it, just to kind of boost the 60 hertz a little bit, but also pull out these massive little notches. The next thing that I did is use BX control again to really make the kick extremely mono all the way up to 565 hertz, and I reduced the stereo width a bit. The next thing was this kilohertz transient plugin. Again, tiny bit of attack removed, a bunch of sustain also removed, and the gate, which basically helps in removing this sort of really long tail that the previous kick had. So, I mean, the takeaway for me here is that pretty much everything was just about subtracting, like removing things. I didn't need to add anything to the kick in the mixdown. I just needed to tame it and control it. Might seem counterintuitive, like why would you pull out so many frequencies out of your kick because you want your kick to sound powerful. But the truth is that if your kick is too large and if it's fighting too much with other parts of the song, it's not going to sound powerful. It's going to sound the opposite of powerful. So that's something to keep in mind. This is the second kick, the kick rhythm. Next up, there's the snare. So one of the reasons why I moved to Logic is just that in the native plugins they're so good. This Logic vintage console EQ is really good. I used it to put some 220 back into the snare, increase about 3.2k, increase about 3.2 a little bit, and also pull down the high shelf a little bit. Over here we have the hats and the tambourine layer, so this is an important layer for your high-end content. This EQ called Lufticus, it's a free EQ, really good with the high end. I boosted a bit of 2.5k and they have this air knob over here. So I also boosted a bit of 10k to kind of give them a little bit of that sparkle in the high end. Some saturation to take off that harsh high end, and some mid-side processing going on over here. On Pro Q, you can use a mid-side mode. So I didn't want the hi-hats to be doing anything in the mono territory. I just wanted them to be out onto the sides. So I did this. There are two scoops that are both only in the mids. So the stereo section is not being affected. Here's that acoustic kit that we saw earlier. As you can see, I kind of went ahead and chopped things up a little more once bringing it in. So it's not strictly a mix session, but it's mostly about the mixing and a little bit about producing a little more if you really feel like it. On this, we have neutron, there's BX control. Again, transient, I'm reducing things, as you can see, reducing the attack, make sure it's not too overwhelming. Again, with Lufticus, just like add some things, remove some things. In this case, I actually removed some of the side signal in the acoustic kit because I felt that it was clashing a bit with the vocals and the hi-hats. And then of course the SFX, which again, I used Lufticus a lot in this session. The vocals, let's take a look at that.
So close to you.
So another Melodyne, which as you can see, there's not much going on, but just in case there were some portions where I still wanted to move things around or nudge them here or there, I put in another Melodyne onto this one. That's also why I needed to have the signal completely dry, because if you have some reverb or delay, you don't want to be using any kind of vocal plugin. Again, BX Console is a very useful plugin that sort of, I mean, it's modeled on the SSL console and some more mid-side processing on the vocals. Just kind of pull out some of the mid-range a little bit. Some of the mid signal a little bit in the mid-range and increase the stereo signal volume in the high end.
I wanna be on your mind. I wanna be on your mind.
You can see that the changes are subtle, but all combined, they're actually quite substantial. The vocal is a little bit brighter, a little bit cleaner. There aren't as many resonant frequencies. And it just has that perfect balance of mid-range and high-end that I was looking for. And the bass line was a big challenge in the song because as I showed you in the previous session, it's just really like a big signal, lots of resonant frequencies, kind of moving around, very floppy, but still really powerful. So the process of actually getting that to sit right took a lot of trial and error. Here's what it sounded like before any processing. And after. I'm basically removing things in almost every single plugin. Most of it is about reduction of things. Got a multi-band compressor, which was super useful in this scenario. Let's take a look at that. The purpose of this was that obviously this layer has this really powerful sub and low range up to about 250. Then it also has problems in the lower mid range. So I put two separate bands over here and have them sort of kicking in only when the volume of that band exceeds a certain threshold. Just EQing it out can make your bass sound a little bit powerless. So try out using multi-band compression for your bass lines. Really helpful. Of course, like another UAD plugin, the LA2A in this case. Another track spacer, which has been side chained to. So I've got the kick basically side chaining this. I need to unmute the kick. Here's the guitar. So I mean, I'd say the guitar is probably the one layer that has increased in volume that I actually boosted in this process, and maybe that's just because I love the guitar. And then this is the string section that I was really excited about, those new Native Instruments plugins that I mentioned earlier. Let's have a listen to those. As you can hear, this is it's really highly filtered out, and you might wonder why, and the answer is so that it fits in with the rest of the song. When I had the strings kind of playing all their frequencies, including the lower mid-range, it just wasn't sitting into the song. I also kind of wanted to go for a bit of a sort of like a old record playing, you know, chamber strings kind of feel. I just love the Stradivarius cello, so expressive. That concludes my track breakdown. Kind of long, but I didn't want to really rush through it, and I wanted this to be of value to whoever is really curious about how I managed to finish the song and make it sound the way it did. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me the questions in the comments. I will happily get back to you. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one.